Hello and welcome to Composition and Photography Project. So, how does this work? You can see here is my project exemplar, and you should be following your project steps. That means that at this point, you've downloaded your best 2 or 3 images onto your computer and stuck them into your design folder. All right, so how do I get from my original image to my final image? Well, first thing you do is when you have a JPEG, you want to right-click on it and open with Adobe Photoshop CS6. Right? If you just double-click on it, by default, you'll see it opens with Preview. Right? So this is my original image. How do I get to my final image? And I want you to go through the following steps that I'm going through, but I also want you to play around with Photoshop, all right? Because part of learning Photoshop is actually playing around with the tools that are available to you. But I do want you to follow the steps that I'm going through. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to create a duplicate copy of your image. You can do that in the menu here. You pick duplicate layer, or you can do Command J. You can do Command J to duplicate the layer. And this is the same exact thing, and you're just having sort of a backup copy. So now you'll see there's a little star here. That means that there's been an edit to your image. And this is a really important step that you should now save as, or file save, as a PSD. In your design folder, you should save this as your name. So Miss G, Composition Project. All right, save. And that should be in your project, in your design folder. So all the work you're doing should be in your design folder, and you should be always naming them with your name and the project. All right, so now that I've done that, I'm ready to get started. The first thing you can play around with is here's the crop tool. If your image is not straight, you can use the straighten tool, which allows you to draw what the straight actual horizontal line is. And once you actually straighten it, and if you want to edit all, you can have original ratio, other sizes. It's kind of up to you what you want to do. You could say, oh, I want to edit in a little bit or not. It's very much up to you in terms of your composition. Remember, you can double click or click enter to go back in. So now I have done my first step. I've made sure I've cropped it or straightened my image of how I want it to look. So you notice every time I make a change, there's a little star. It's a good habit to, after you make some big changes, to save your image, because unlike when you're using Google Docs, it doesn't save automatically. The next step you're going to do is you're going to go to Image, Adjustments. You're going to go to the one that says Shadows and Highlights. And here's where we can see our preview. You can see we can play around with recovering some of our highlights if we need to, the shadows, lightening and darkening some of the shadows. Don't really do their color corrections here, just look at the highlights and the shadows. So you can play with recovering some of the shadow details or the highlight details, and click the preview on and off to sort of see what your differences are. And you don't want to do too much because you don't want to lose too much contrast, but this is a nice little feature right here. Click OK. So remember, this is a permanent change. So you can see the difference now. This is why we have a backup copy. When we use adjustment layers, that's a editable change. So that's the difference between a change that's permanent and a change that is non-destructive, that's editable. All right, so after I've done shadows and highlights, and you play around with the highlights and the shadows, next you're going to use an adjustment layer, and you can get to it right here, or you can get to it right here. And the one I want you to do is curves. And this is where you can sort of see all the tones of your image, and you might want to just up the sort of exposure of your image a little bit. So you can darken it or you can lighten it. It's a very lightly change it here. And you can see what it looks like with it on and with it off. All right, so that's your next step. You can also, along the way, be playing around with using the masking, which is, this is the masking layer right here. If you draw on it, you would be masking out part of the detail. So if you have something here and you're like, I really want to make sure that the windows are actually not being sort of changed, you can see here, It's changing only the part that's white. So I encourage you to be playing with masking throughout this process. So I'm just going to mask in that part. So it's only applying the changes to the white part. All right, so the next step that you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking sort of a screenshot sort of the project that you're working on. So all these steps, these two steps, you're going to be combining them into one. So you're going to do Command-Alt-Shift-E. And this makes a flattened layer of all those changes. All right, and the reason we want to do this is because now we want to edit directly to this layer. All right, so the next thing we want to do is Image Adjust HDR Toning. Image Adjustments HDR Toning. All right, so it says you want to flatten your document. Just say yes, and I'll show you how to go back, and you're actually going to get back all those layers. So here you can play with, some of the tone and the detail, and adding more of that. This gives it more of an HDR effect, shadows and brightness. So you can toggle on and off the preview to see what your image is looking like. So say okay. So now, very importantly, you're going to select all, Command-A, and Command-C, copy this part of your image process. Now, you're going to go to Window, History, and this is very useful. So you can always go to the history and go back in time. And here you can see, now I've gone back in time to where I had all my layers. And I'm just going to paste in that HDR layer. There you go. You've now still have a history of all the work you've done, and now you have an HDR toning layer. All right? So that is HDR toning. You can boost details. It's a nice sort of feature in Photoshop. The last thing that I definitely want you to do is to use an adjustment layer, and I want you to use vibrance. Don't really use saturation so much. That can not necessarily look so great, but vibrance is a nice one where you can sort of desaturate or ultra saturate your image. And this is something that can be really cool to play around with. So if I really want to be very, very stark image, I would maybe go to here. All right. So at this point, I really want you to be saving your image. All right. And I want you, if this is one of your final images, you're going to File, Save As, JPEG. And this is going to be one of the images you submit. But wait, that's not all. I do want you to also submit with one of your final images. So if this is the image I'm going to submit, I want you to submit one copy. That's just that image. So this is the copy, just that image. But then I want you to submit a copy that has text over it that says what compositional element you used. So go to the text tool right here. You click on it. You click on your screen. And I use leading lines. And you can change the color of this. I'm going to make this white. And you can change the size, and you can change the font, and you can move it around. And I'm going to save it. And now I'm also going to File, Save As, JPEG, text. So now you have two copies of your final project as JPEGs. One of the image without text, one of the image with text.